we are going to integrate Stripe payments. First, I will show you what a customer experiences when they want to pay with Stripe. Then I will show you how in the admin you can set up your checkout page and your Stripe credentials. And lastly, I will show you how you can get your Stripe credentials in case you are not familiar with Stripe and you don't have a Stripe account. First, let me log in as a member. So I'm clicking on login. Member@gmail.com is the fake member account that we have in this demo application by default. The password is 12341234, so you log in. And you can see the member dashboard. So these are the courses that this fake member has already purchased. And the course that we are going to purchase will be the German Intermediate course. In order to be able to buy a course, let's click on courses in the header. Then we will see all our fake courses in this demo application. And let's scroll down, and the German Intermediate course is the one that we are after. So click on go to course. And as you can see, we have the option to buy this course for $555.55. So let's click on buy now, and we will be navigated to the checkout page. On the left side of the checkout page, you see the contact information and the billing address. Now, this data will have to be provided by the customer, except for the phone and the apartment information, but all the other fields are required. In our demo application, only registered users can navigate to the checkout, so the email address field is populated automatically. As you can see, we have member.gmail.com populated in this field, and then this field is made read-only, so there is no way to change the value on this field, at least on the front end when we are doing the checkout. On the right side of the checkout, you see the checkout and payment section, and here you can see the product that is to be purchased, and this is the German Intermediate course, and the price of this product. Below this checkout and payment section, you see the select the payment method section, and I already enabled Stripe for this example. And if I click on credit card by Stripe, you see that the Stripe fields appear. And below the payment method section, there is this red square, and this is actually a checkbox where we force the customer to accept the terms and conditions and the privacy policy before starting the payment. So if I click on it and click on this checkbox, then this red square becomes green and everything is fine. So the customer will be able to start the payment. However, of course, the customer first must provide the contact info and the billing address info, but you see that we have this fill in dummy info button here. So if you click on this button, then some dummy info will be at your disposal, so you will not have to manually provide the first name, last name, and so on when you are testing this demo application, and you can just start the payment flow. I will show you an example Stripe payment, and actually I will show you one where we have 3D secure validation. So let's navigate to this URL. Later we will get back to this URL, so while I'm integrating Stripe for you, but what I wanted to show you here is that we can use this test card number to get a pop-up model like this one here, as you can see, and this is like a mock 3D secure validation. So I think I already copied this card number, and let me just provide it here. Okay, the expiry should be something that is valid, so something in the future. All right, and the CVV should be 123 or whatever you want. It should be, three digits, and that's it. Now after that, we can click on complete purchase, and you will see that a spinner will appear here. That is on our side, so it doesn't come from Stripe. However, you will see that the model window will appear, in which we can confirm the payment. So let me just click to complete purchase. Spinner is here. And we are waiting for Stripe now. And indeed, we have this model window, 3D Secure 2 test page. This is a test 3D Secure 2 authentication. In live mode, customers will be asked to verify their identity with a push notification, a text message, or another method chosen by their bank. So for now, in this test 3D secure authentication, I can just click on complete, and then Stripe will complete the purchase. And of course, after the successful purchase, we will also create the order for the customers, and then this member that we are logged in with will have access to the German intermediate course. Okay, let's click on complete. There will be a processing model that comes from us, from our demo application, and we have the order confirmation. Thank you for your purchase, and we can click on go to dashboard. And as you can see, the German intermediate course appeared in our table, so the customer here, a member at gmail.com, is associated with this course and can start learning. Now let's go and log in as an admin, and I will show you how you can customize the checkout page and what you have to provide for your Stripe integration to work. So I'm going to log out now, and I'm going to log in as an admin. So our admin is our admin account is admin@gmail.com, and the password is 12341234. Click on login, and we will shortly arrive in the admin dashboard. Here we are. What is important for us now is the payment management. So click on payment management, and let's click on settings. These are basically the checkout settings. As you can see, there are two sections basically. The payment settings, where we can customize our checkout, and the payment gateway settings, where we can enable or disable Stripe. And of course, we can do the same for Braintree and the PayPal Smart Buttons. However, for us, for now, only this field is important because this is the Stripe integration section of the course. So let's scroll up. You can select a currency, and if you checked the Braintree section of the course, then you know that for Braintree, your merchant account determines what currency will be the customer charged in. So it doesn't matter what currency you choose here, Braintree will always charge it in the merchant account. And of course, if you're using Braintree, it is very important to have this harmony between the currency here and your merchant account. However, with Stripe, it works a bit differently because the currency that you choose here will be the basis on which the customer will be charged. So if I select euro here, so EUR, and I provide only the Stripe option for the customer to pay, then the customer will be billed in euro. And of course, euro will be shown on our front end as well. However, if I change to USD, change back to USD, then the customer will be billed in USD. The next option is use integer prices. Now, if you're working with USD, then you probably don't want to use integer prices because it's usual that USD prices have decimals. However, there are certain currencies that don't really use decimal numbers. So if you use integer prices, or if you set this option to yes, then it doesn't matter. Even if in the backend there is a decimal price, it will be rounded to an integer price, and your customers in the demo application will only see the integer prices. However, I don't need to use integer prices because I will stick with USD. Now there is the other option, use currency symbol. Now if you select USD, Euro, or British Pounds, then and if you select yes or set this field to yes, then on the front end you will see the USD symbol instead of the USD text, the Euro symbol instead of the EUR text, and the British Pound symbol instead of the GBP text. If you selected another currency, then it doesn't matter if you set this option to yes or no, you will see the text of the currency. In my opinion, it's nice to use the currency symbol for these three currencies. So in our backend, we only provided the currency symbols for these three currencies. This is why we declare it in the description that it only works if you use these three currencies. So, you know, if you are using these currencies, I think it's good to use the symbol because it just looks a bit nicer on the front end. The next option you have is using the comma for separating decimals. So by default, this is set to no, or I mean, for me, it is set to no, because when you work with USD, then the usual way is to use the period for separating the decimals and to use the comma for separating the thousands. However, if your customers are from Germany, then you might want to set this to yes, because in Germany, the usual way is to use the comma for separating the decimals and the period as a thousand separator. However, I will not change this. So these were the options for customizing your checkout, and in the payment gateway settings section, what we are interested in is this enable Stripe field. It has to be set to yes if you want to use Stripe, obviously. Now I disable Braintree and I disable the PayPal Smart buttons, and I only enable Stripe. So for me, only the Stripe option will be shown, as I showed you in the example checkout a few minutes ago. However, of course, if you want the customers to be able to use Braintree and the PayPal Smart buttons as well, you can enable them as well. So it doesn't matter from the front-end integration. From the point of view of our demo application, it doesn't matter if anything else is enabled besides Stripe or not. If you are finished with your settings, so if you set everything you wanted, then you can save the page. However, first, make sure that you have provided all the data that is needed for the Stripe to work well. So let's click on the Stripe menu item here. And here you can see what you have to provide in order for Stripe to function well. First, you have to select the environment. So it has to be test or live. Now, obviously, I'm selecting test environment, and I think that you should also select test environment to test our integration. And what you need when you select the test environment is your Stripe test publishable key and your test secret key. Once you have these, save them, and then you can go back to the settings and save your settings as well. However, if you don't know how to get these keys, and don't worry, because now I'm going to show you where you can get these keys from. We have to navigate to dashboard.stripe.com. Now, if you already have a Stripe account, you have to log in. If not, you have to sign up. Of course, I already have an account, so I will just log into my account. And soon my dashboard will appear. All right, we're still loading, but yes, here we are. Here you see your email address with which you registered with Stripe. I suggest you verify this email address. But what is important for us now is to get your test API keys. So you can just click on Get Your Test API Keys. And you see that your publishable key is here. You can copy it. And your secret key is here. You can click on Reveal Test Key and then copy your test key. Now, obviously, copy the publishable key to this test publishable key field here, and copy your secret key after you have revealed it to your test secret key field here, and then you can save your Stripe settings. Of course, make sure that the environment is test if you are using the test publishable key and the test secret key. Now, obviously, if you want to test your Stripe integration production, you have to set this to live, and then you have to provide your live publishable key and live secret key. However, I think that at the point where you are confident enough to test your Stripe integration live, then you will know how to get your live API keys. As you can see, with this account, I don't have any live API keys yet. And there is one more very important thing with Stripe and 3D Secure too. So if you want to use the 3D Secure flow with your Stripe, then you have to go to settings in your dashboard, and you have your radar rules. So you have radar, the radar option or section here, monitor fraud with machine learning. So what you have to do is to click on rules and make sure that this is active or this is selected. Request 3D Secure if 3D Secure is required for card. A few minutes ago, I showed you an example checkout, and there was this model window that appeared. Now that was the test 3D Secure authentication. Now, in order to get that model window, then make sure that this option is active for you and not the other two options. So just to quickly sum up before we actually start integrating Stripe, you should log into your dashboard. You can go to Overview. You should get your API keys. Then copy your API keys here. Save your Stripe settings. then go back to your settings, customize your checkout, make sure to enable Stripe, save these settings, and then we can go on. It is time to integrate Stripe into our project. The basis of our integration is coming from GitHub. This is an official GitHub repository provided by Stripe. We are not going to use webhooks in our integration, so you can either check the decline on card authentication section or the without webhooks section of this GitHub repo. I will show you where you have to go if you want to have a sneak peek. So we go to public, and here we are. After we integrate Stripe into our demo project, I will come back to this repository and I will tell you in more detail what is happening here. But if you just want to get an idea how we are going to implement Stripe, then you can just check some of these files. What you would want to check is the pay.php and the script.js for sure. And now let's go back to the payment settings. In the Braintree section of the course, I provided a more detailed overview of this payment settings section, and if you skipped the Braintree section, I would recommend watching it because a lot of things are covered in this section that are going to be needed for the Stripe section as well. But because I don't want to duplicate videos, I'm not going to include more detailed explanations of the payment settings admin in the Stripe section. However, before the payment settings, let's go to Visual Studio Code and let's migrate and seed our data. So I will open a new terminal and I will put PHP artisan migrate fresh seed here and run the command. So I just want to get rid of every changes that I made while recording the Braintree integration, and now we have a freshly migrated and seeded database. Let's close the terminal, and now let's go back to the payment settings in the admin. Let's just quickly refresh. And the currency can stay USD. I don't want to use integer prices. Currency symbol, yeah, I want to use the currency symbol, and I don't want to use comma for separating the decimals. Braintree can be stayed enabled. We don't need PayPal within Braintree for the Stripe section, but it is important to enable Stripe. Yep. And actually we don't have to enable the PayPal smart buttons now. So let's just save this and update our settings. And now Stripe should be on our checkout page. Let's just quickly check this. I'm here on a checkout page. Here you can see that we have only Braintree, but it's because I have not refreshed yet, so I'll refresh. And indeed, we have the Stripe payment here. Let's check the Stripe sections of the checkout blade file. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code and let's go to checkout.blade.php. It's in the resources views folder. So if Stripe is enabled in our project, then we are going to include the stripejs.blade.php file. We are going to talk about this file a lot. And if Stripe is enabled, then we are going to have a form. And this is the form that is included into our Blade file. And this is the div with the ID of Stripe card element, where we are going to load the Stripe elements with the help of the Stripe JavaScript SDK. And as you can see, if I scroll up, yeah, if Stripe is enabled, then this div is added to the checkout front end. So this card that you see here is added to the checkout front end, otherwise it's not. Later I will come back to this form, and of course I will come back to how we are going to load the Stripe elements into this div. Before we get deeper into the Stripe integration, you're going to have to get your own Stripe test publishable key and test secret key. In order to do that, of course, you have to register an account with Stripe. And after you're registered, you have to go to dashboard.stripe.com, where you can get your test API keys. You see there is this section here, get your test API keys. Click on it. and you will get your publishable key that you can just copy with a click, and then Stripe will confirm that it's copied. And you will also need to copy your secret key. So first we have to reveal the test key, and after it is revealed, it can be copied with a click. Now, after you copy these values, then add them to these two fields. So the test publishable key is the publishable key, and the secret key is the test secret key. Make sure that the selected environment is the test environment. Obviously, if you want to use live Stripe payments, then you have to select live here, and you have to provide a live publishable key and a live secret key as well. Now let's just save these, and we are fine. We are now in the admin payment Stripe route, and this request is being taken care of by the Stripe controller. Here I'm here in app HTTP controllers admin Stripe controller. Here we are, and we have an update function, and we also have an index function. So the index function or method takes care of the request when we first load it, or when I just refresh the page, and it is going to set my environment based on the Stripe settings table, and it is going to populate my publishable keys, my publishable key and secret key as well. Now obviously the controller takes my Stripe settings, so basically the first row from the Stripe _ settings table, and then passes it onto the view, the stripe.blade.php file. Let's check this file quickly. So stripe.blade.php. Let's scroll down a bit. As you can see, if there is a successful update, then we are going to be shown with this div. I will quickly update again my Stripe keys. So yeah, because the update was successful, we got a session variable, and then we got this success message with the green background. Let's go back to the Blade file. And of course here we have a simple form. The form action is the admin Stripe update route, and actually this is getting taken care of by the Stripe controller by the update action or method. We have added the CSRF directive to prevent the cross-site request forgery attacks, and we also use the method blade directive, so actually this route is going to be defined as a put route in our web.php file. Let's check this quickly. So I will go to web.php. This is in the routes folder, and we see that in the admin, so in the route group for the admins, we have the get route payment Stripe. So this is taken care of by the index method of the Stripe controller. But when we update the settings, then we are hitting the payment Stripe update URL. It is a put request, and the update method of the Stripe controller takes care of our request. So the form is going to be submitted to the update method. Let's now go back to our Stripe Blade file. Okay, so we have just a few settings here. The first is the Stripe environment. Now the old helper should be familiar to you at this point. So what is happening is that if for some reason we fail an update, then the old helper will populate the value for this select field that was submitted with the request. So let's say that I want to change this to live environment, but for some reason the validation fails or something happens, and then we couldn't go through with the update, then I would still have live here in this field after the failed validation. This is what the old helper is for. However, if I just refresh the page, so there was no submit request that failed, then the old helper just takes the Stripe environment value from the Stripe settings. So don't forget that this is the Stripe settings table in our database. And because it is set to test currently, then it is going to be selected. Let's check our database. So this is the Sonic Payments database for me. And we have the Stripe settings table. And you see that the Stripe environment is test here. But if I change this to live, and if I go back to the Stripe settings and refresh, then this changed to live. But actually I will change it back because I want to use the test keys. Oh, sorry, test. Okay. I will go back, refresh again, and the selected environment is test. So just to quickly go over this again, my Stripe environment is test in the database. This Stripe settings Stripe environment is going to give back the string test. And because there was no failed submission of the form, the old helper we're going to take this value, so the test value, not the old value from this select tag, but this test value, and it will compare it to test, to the string test, and because they will be the same thing when I refresh the page, then it is going to be selected. So the first option is going to be selected. And of course, when I changed the value from test to live in the database, then the second option was selected because the Stripe settings Stripe environment gave back the string live. Now we shouldn't really fail the validations in the Stripe settings, but it's good to go over it a bit. Then we have a few remaining input fields, like 4, test publishable key. This is just a text input. The test secret key. This is also a text input, the live publishable key and the live secret key. So these are all test inputs. Let's go now to the Stripe controller and let's check the update method. So here we are, we received the request, and then we are going to make a validation or check against some validation rules. For the Stripe environment, we have the rule that it is required, and we are using the rule facade, which means that it and the in method. So it means that if the submitted value for the Stripe environment is neither test nor live, then the validation fails because these are the only values that we accept for this select tag or for this value, for the select environment value or Stripe environment value, sorry. Now for the publishable keys and the secret keys, these can be nullable, so you don't have to actually provide anything here, but of course Stripe will not work if you don't provide the keys here, and they just have to be string. So this is why I say that we should never really fail this validation, because you either have to choose test or live and provide some strings, and there are no complex validation rules for the Stripe settings. However, if the validation fails for some reason, then we are redirected back to the Stripe settings with the errors that come from the validator, and we will also redirect back with input. So it means that we will save or we will retrieve the values that were submitted, and then for example, if you wanted to change the Stripe environment to live but you failed the validation, then in the field live will be populated here because we redirect back with the input, and the old helper is going to take care of this for us. But really this is such a simple validation that we can only fail it if we really want to fail it. So we are back into the Stripe controller, and if everything is fine, then we are getting the Stripe settings, and we should get the Stripe settings. So if we don't get them, then it's a big problem, and then we abort. So the Stripe settings is the first row from the Stripe _ settings table. Let's go check it in the database. Yeah, this is it. Now let's go back to the controller. So we get the Stripe settings, and we are calling the fill method with with all the data that came with the request. Now, in earlier videos, I described the fill function in more detail, but I will say it in this video as well, that this only works if the names, so if you know the keys of the request object, correspond with the column names in the database table. So Stripe environment, test publishable key, Stripe test secret key, and so on, these values have to correspond exactly with the columns that we are going to update in our database. And you see that in this case it's true. So we have a Stripe environment column, a Stripe test publishable key column, and so on. Otherwise the fill method is not going to work. Let's get back to the controller. And when we go to our Stripe setting model, then you will see that we have this protected guarded variable or class property, and this is an empty array. So if you want to use the fill method, then you have to have this as well in your model. And if you put something in this guarded array, so let's say that you put the Stripe environment string into this array, then the fill method is not going to update the Stripe environment. So this is for security reasons. You can control what fields can be updated or what fields can be mass assigned in Laravel. But for our purposes now, we don't have to guard against anything. We can just freely update or mass assign these 5 database columns. And we save our Stripe settings and we redirect back with a success message. So this is going to be the session variable. And we already saw this message, the Stripe settings have been successfully updated. When we are redirected back, then we will have this success message session variable. And let's go quickly to the stripe.blade.php file. And yes, as you can see, if there is a session variable, a success message session variable, then this div appears. So this is why we saw the success message with a nice green background. So once you successfully update your Stripe settings, then we can move on with the integration. Let's now check what happens from a Stripe integration point of view when we navigate to the checkout. So I will go to the courses page first. Okay, then I have a list of courses here, and I want to buy the German intermediate course. So I can buy it for $555.55. Let's click on Buy Now. And now we hit the checkout page. So let's see what takes care of this request for us. So the route is going to be the checkout/course slug. Let's check the web.php file. So web.php. And let's just search for checkout. Ah, yeah, this is it. This is a get route. So checkout/course slug. And the course slug now is the German intermediate course, obviously. So this request is being taken care of by the index method of the checkout controller. Let's just navigate to the checkout controller. So actually I use Control P to search within the file names. And when I search within a file, I press Control F. But now I press Control P, and now I will navigate to the checkout controller. All right, here we are. In earlier videos, I talked more about the checkout controller, so I'm not going to go through all the lines of code here, but I will check what is here for Stripe. What is relevant for Stripe is that we get these settings, so we get the first row from the settings table, and we will have this variable Stripe enabled, and we will check if the enable Stripe column in the settings table is true or false, or 1 or 0. Obviously, if Stripe is not enabled, then our integration will not work, so it has to be enabled. And if it is not enabled for you, then you have to go to the admin, to payment management settings, and then you have to enable Stripe. So you have to set this input to yes, but this is what we did when we started with the Stripe integration. So for me it is enabled and everything seems to be fine. So Stripe is enabled in my case, and then I will go down a bit, and yeah, so you see that I check for this Stripe enabled in this if branch, but before I do it, I have a variable Stripe pub key, so this is the Stripe publishable key, and I set it to an empty string, and if Stripe is not enabled, then this empty string will be passed on to the view, but it will never be used because Stripe is not enabled. However, if Stripe is indeed enabled, then we have to get a few more things. So then we are going to get our Stripe settings, so the first row from the Stripe settings table. And if we have the Stripe settings, then we are not going to abort, and we should never abort, so this table should always be present in the database. Now, if the Stripe environment is the test environment in the Stripe settings table, then we are populating the Stripe pub key variable with the test publishable key value. However, if it is not the test environment, then it has to be the live environment, and then we will get the live Stripe publishable key saved into this Stripe pub key variable. And of course, this variable is passed on to the view. So we have to check the checkout.blade file, .blade.php file, and the two variables that are important for us are the Stripe enabled variable and the Stripe pub key variable. Let's navigate to the checkout.blade.php file. So again, with Control P, I'm searching for this file. It's right here. And Stripe enabled, yes. So, as I mentioned in an earlier video, if Stripe is enabled, then we are going to have this accordion on our front end. So then we are going to have this in our front end. But it is going to be empty actually at the beginning, and then the Stripe JavaScript SDK is going to load the Stripe relevant fields into this accordion. However, the important thing is that Stripe is enabled, so we are going to have this div, this lone div on our front end. And the important sections for us are basically the div with the ID Stripe card element. So this is an empty div when the page first loads, but then we are going to load the Stripe elements into this div. And of course we have the form. I will tell you that in later we will look into this form in more detail, but actually this form just contains a lot of hidden inputs, and this form, when we submit this form, then we have already received the Stripe payment. If you check the Braintree integration section, then you might notice that it's a bit different than this form, than from the Braintree form, and you don't know that based on this, based on the form itself, so based on the input fields, but the logic is different. So when the Braintree form was submitted, then the Braintree form, the Braintree payment was confirmed by submitting this form. However, in the case of Stripe, as you will see, the payment is already confirmed and then this form gets submitted. So this form only gets submitted after the Stripe payment was successful. But let's not rush ahead. We will talk about this more. But what I want to show you is that if Stripe is enabled, then we have the Stripe JS blade file. So it's stripejs.blade.php. Let's navigate to it. And this is the file where most of our Stripe integration is. So this is the file in which we are going to go through in great detail, and then we will check what happens when we make a successful or unsuccessful Stripe payment. I will provide a quick overview of the stripejs.blade.php file, and then later we are going to go into detail and check what is happening in this file line by line. At the bottom, we are including the Stripe JavaScript SDK, and then we declare our own variables. We use this style object, and what is happening here is actually we just take Stripe's basic default style for styling the Stripe elements. So this, what you see here, comes from the Stripe documentation. And then we are going to load the Stripe elements into the front end. So as I mentioned earlier, we have an empty div with the ID of Stripe card element. And actually in this line, we are going to load the Stripe elements into this empty div. And this is why we see this in this div instead of nothing. But let's go back to the JS file. So after the Stripe element is created, we are going to add an event listener to our forms, and we will do some validations. This check terms acceptance, for example. And then we go to the validation function. With an AJAX request, we will validate the info that the user provides, so first name, last name, and also the billing address. And if the validation is fine, then we are going to complete the Stripe payment, and we will use the fetch API, about which I will talk in more detail. But basically, we are finishing the payment here in this complete Stripe payment function. And then we are creating our orders. We are submitting our form, to which we added an event listener, and we will create the order. So we will create the order for this German intermediate course. Okay, so this is really just a quick overview, or at least it was intended it to be. And next we are going to get into more detail. We are going to go through this Stripe JS file until the Stripe elements are created on our front end. So from line 1 to line 28, we are going to go through this file. So in the first line, we just include the Stripe JavaScript SDK. Obviously, if we don't do this, we cannot use Stripe in our demo application. Then we save our Stripe publishable key. Remember that it comes from the checkout controller. The checkout controller passes this onto our view, and then we save it to a JavaScript variable. We use the @JSON blade directive to pass this PHP variable to JavaScript variable. And then we instantiate this Stripe object. So in this Stripe variable, we instantiate an object. Now, this is a new Stripe object. We don't have to use the new keyword here, and we have access to this Stripe object because we included this Stripe JavaScript SDK, and we have to pass this Stripe publishable key as a parameter to this Stripe object. Now, after we have this Stripe object, we are going to call the elements method on it, and we are going to save the result into this elements variable, which should also be an object actually. And then we are going to save this payment form Stripe into a Stripe form variable. Let's go back to our checkout blade file and take a look again at this payment form Stripe. So checkout.blade.php. And as you can see, this is the form that we are saving into a JavaScript variable, the form with a lot of hidden input fields. Let's check it in the developer tools, sorry. So I press F12, and they should be somewhere here above this button. Okay, let's get the button. Ah, yes, it's here. So this is our totally empty form for now. And let's go back to the JS file. So the Stripe JS. So into the Stripe form variable, we are saving this totally empty form. We have a payment intent ID variable, and this is instantiated to 0. At first, I will talk in more detail about the Stripe payment intents. It's an important topic, but for now it's enough to know that we have this variable which holds the value 0. We also have a string variable, server error Stripe, and this is just the string server error occurred Stripe. I will use this as basically a failure message, this string, and with this variable I will be able to check if a failure occurred while submitting requests or not. I also have a basic form Stripe variable. I will save form data into this variable. I can tell you that I will save data that I want to validate into that variable, so I will save the contact information and the billing address into this JavaScript variable, and also the total amount. Let's go back to the JavaScript file. We have this card variable with a lot of key value pairs, as you can see. Now, as I mentioned, this comes from the Stripe documentation, but let's just quickly go through it. So then we have again the base key, and the base key contains all this info. So the color of the fonts, the font family, the font smoothing, the font size, and then the placeholder color. And we also have the invalid key, so this should come into play when the customer provides an invalid card number, for example, and we have a color defined and an icon color defined for the invalid values. Let's go to the checkout. So as you can see that the style is defined here, and if I put some sort of invalid card number, then we have this reddish color or orangish color, I don't know, and the icon color is the same because we define the same color for the font and for the icon color when the user provides invalid data. So just wanted to show you that this indeed actually works in our integration. Now let's go back to the JS file. On line 27, now we actually create this Stripe card, or this Stripe card element. So we have a variable card, and we have this elements object. As you remember, we called the elements function on the Stripe object, and then we got the elements object. This, of course, also comes from the Stripe API, Stripe SDK. So we call the create method on the elements object, and we will pass card as the first argument because we want a card there, a credit card. And then I also pass these options. So obviously you have to pass the style. Now we have the style key, and we actually pass this style variable to the style key. This might be a bit confusing, but basically Stripe wants you to pass a value to the style for the style key, and we just called it style. However, this is the key, and this is our style variable here. And one other thing that I put here is a true value for the hide postal code key, because if you don't do this, then Stripe will also require the customer to provide a postal code. And actually, I think that the CVC number is more than enough when a customer wants to buy something. So I just require this additional parameter when creating this card element or this Stripe card object. And then finally, we call the mount method on this card object, and we provide the Stripe card element ID here. And if you remember, this is an empty div. Let's just copy this value and go to the checkout blade file. Oops. So yeah, this is our empty div, and when we call the mount, where is the JS file? So we are mounting or loading this card object into this empty div, and this is why we have this nice Stripe card element here on our front end. So this mount method took care of it for us. Let's press now F12, and let's just find this div. So you see how much stuff Stripe put there. So it should be somewhere here. Yes. So this is the Stripe card element div, and don't forget that this was empty when we first loaded the page, and then all of this stuff comes from Stripe. All of this stuff comes from calling mount on the card object. Let's just go back to the Stripe.js file. And yes, we reached line 28 now. Let's continue the Stripe integration. We will check how we are validating the data that the customer provides. So the contact information, the billing address, and also the total amount. This is not provided by the customer. However, we will validate it to make sure that the customer doesn't tamper with our total amount. Let's go to the Stripe.js file. Now we are at line 30. So we have this Stripe form. Remember that the Stripe form is this payment form Stripe. So this form with the ID payment form Stripe. And this is so far an empty form. Let's press F12. And actually this button is part of the form. So if I select the button, yes, this is the payment form Stripe, as you can see. So let's get back to the JS. So we are adding an event listener to this payment form. So when we click this button, then the form is not going to be submitted. It's almost totally empty. We have actually the CSRF token already, but otherwise this form is totally empty. So we don't want to submit it, obviously. So we add an event listener on the submit event, and we prevent the default. So we will not submit the form when we click on the button. And then we start our validations. First, we check if the terms checkbox is ticked. So when the customer wants to pay, then we want the customer to tick this checkbox, because if the customer doesn't accept the terms and conditions and the privacy policy, then we will not let the customer to submit a payment request. Let's go back to the JS file. Now this function, the check terms acceptance function, is in a other JS or other blade file. Oh, sorry. It should be the checkout JS blade.php in the resources views JS for views folder. Let's go and let's check the terms acceptance. Okay, so this is the function, and it is something very, very simple. So if the terms checkbox, so the ID is terms checkbox, if the property, the check property is false, so if the checkbox is not checked, then we are going to show an error and scroll up to the top of the page with an error message. And this will be the error message, and then we return false. So we go back to the Stripe.js file, and then if terms are checked, if the terms are checked variable is false, then we just return, and then we don't proceed with the validations, with the other validations, and of course with the Stripe payment. We can just check this very quickly if it works, but of course in earlier videos you should have seen some test checkouts or test payments. But if I just click, if I give sort of a valid credit card number, like test credit card number, obviously, and I don't check this checkbox, then after I click, I will have this error message. Yes. And we also scrolled up. If you're attentive, you see that we scrolled up a bit. So the JavaScript scrolled up a bit, and we got these terms and conditions, and the privacy policy must be accepted before payment error message. So let's go to the JS file. Sorry, the checkout JS file, and indeed, this is the message that we received. And the show error and scroll up function takes care of the rest. So it will going to show our validation text. We will have this reset fields after payfail function as well. I will talk about it a bit later. And then we are just scrolling up to the top of the page. Now back to the Stripe.js file. So once the checkbox is checked, then we proceed with the validations. And then we call this change fields after pay start function, which is in the checkout.js file. Let's go to it. And let's find the function. So what this function does is it hides error messages it shows a spinner. So we will indicate to the customer that sort of the payment started, or, at least the validation of the data before the payment. But of course, the customer doesn't know that it's first the validation, then the payment. But what is important, the customer will see a spinner, so the customer knows that things are in motion. And then we are just disabling the fields on the checkout and the buttons. And the reason why we are doing it is that after the customer provides the info and starts the payment, then we don't want the customer to change this data. So once the data is set, it should be set for good for the payment or for the order. Let's go back to the checkout.js file actually, because I mentioned a bit earlier that there is this reset fields after pay fail function. When we show an error, yes, then we call this reset fields after pay fail function before we scroll up to the top of the page. And what happens here is that we just set the disabled properties to false, so we are enabling the fields again. So after a pay fail, if the payment failed for some reason, then the customer will have the opportunity to change the details. Maybe actually the payment failed because of some data that the customer provided, but we will talk about this later, a bit later, when we will go into the validation of the contact information. So we're in the checkout.js file now. Let's go back to the Stripe.js file. And then we have this basic forms Stripe variable, which is empty when we first declare it. And then we are going to instantiate a new form data here. So form data is a key value pair object, and this is where we will save the data that we are going to validate. And we call the append basic data function. It is also in our checkout.js file. And then we will pass this basic form Stripe variable here as an argument. And actually, this is empty for now. Let's go to our checkout.js file. Now, obviously, in this checkout.js file, we have our checkout helpers. And these helpers are used not just for Stripe, but also for Braintree. And actually, I would suggest checking the Braintree section if you haven't done so, because I get into maybe a bit more detail about these functions in the Braintree sections. However, of course, during the Stripe integration, I also tell you what is happening during the validation. So we are here in the append basic data function, and we passed our basic form Stripe here. Now the argument's name is empty form because an empty form should be passed to this function. And what we do is we append key value pairs to this form data, to this so far empty form data. So the first key that we are passing is this underscore token, and then we call this, use this blade directive, the C, and call. So we use this, the curly braces blade directive to echo a CSRF token, and we use the CSRF token function. And then we will get our CSRF token, and it will be appended as the value into the form. And of course, the key will be this underscore token. This is necessary because when we will validate, we will fire an AJAX request, and it will be a post request, and we need this underscore token and the valid CSRF token, otherwise the request will be invalid. We also append the total to our form, so the key is total, and we are finding the element with the ID total and the data total attribute. Let's go to the checkout blade file, and let's see where this data total attribute is. So it's right here. We have this total here. Let's go to the front end. So you see it's here. And if I press F12 and select this total, yes, then you see that we have this div, and this is it where you see the final price. Now, of course, in this demo project, we always have only one product, so this number should be the same as this number, but what we are interested in is this total div, this div with the ID of total, and then we have the data total attribute where we load, or where we set the total, so where we set the amount that is going to be charged for the customer. And so this value, this 555.55, is going to be appended to our form, form data, sorry. Oh, it's in the checkout JS. Sorry about that. So you see, this is the div with the ID of total, and this is the data total attribute. And let's just check again the checkout blade file. So you see that the price of the course will be here. And of course, the course is passed on to this checkout blade file by the checkout controller. Okay, let's move back to the checkout.js file. So we have the token, the total, then we have all this data, and all this data is the contact information and the billing information. So this here and this here. And then finally, we also append the currency to our form data, and we use the blade directives here, the double curly braces, to echo out this PHP variable that was given to us by the checkout controller. And this is not the currency symbol, as the name suggests, is the currency text raw. So this should be not the USD symbol, but the string USD. We also append it to our form. Let's go back to the Stripe.js file. It's open. So we appended the basic data. So this basic form Stripe form data is full of key value pairs now. And now we are going to call the validate data Stripe function. And as you can see, we will use this form data that we just loaded. What happens here is that we submit an AJAX request. So we are using the AJAX function of jQuery. And we will submit this request to the checkout/validate/course ID /course slug URL. Don't forget that we have the course passed on by the controller. So this is how we can take the course ID using the blade directive and enclosing it in quotes. And this is how we can take the course slug. So let's check the web.php file. Let's check what picks up this request. So checkout, it's here. It's a post request, obviously. So checkout validate /course ID /course slug, and the prepayment validation method of the checkout controller will take care of this request. Let's go to the checkout controller. And let's search for this prepayment. Yep, it's here. So this is what is going to take care of the request. But first, let's go back to the Stripe.js file. Okay, the method is post. And the data that we are going to submit with the request is this basic form Stripe variable. So you remember that we called the append basic data function, and we passed this empty form data to this function. However, now we have all information in this, or all data in this variable here that we need to validate. And of course, we also have the CSRF token. We also have these two options with the AJAX request. So I set process data to false, which means that jQuery will not modify our data, so this basic form Stripe, in any way when we send the request. And content type false is only relevant when we have files in our form. We don't have files in our form now. However, I use this AJAX function a lot, and then I prefer to leave it here in case I have some files in my form. But you know, for our demo application, this really doesn't make a difference. So after we fire the AJAX request, then two things can happen. One is that we receive an error. For example, the URL was not good, so the request could not be completed. And in this case, we call the show error and scroll up function and pass this unknown error during validation message to it, and then we return. But hopefully we will never receive an error like this in our demo application. Now the other scenario, of course, is the success scenario, so when the request was completed. The checkout controller, or the prepayment validation method of the checkout controller, is going to return JSON for us, and this will be this result here in our JavaScript. And if we have the successful validation property or key in our result object, then we will move on and complete the Stripe payment, or then try to pay at least, or submit a payment request. Otherwise, if we don't have this property, then we are going to call JSON stringify on the result object, which means that we're going to make a JSON from this result, and then we will beautify it and show it as an error. I will go back to this a bit later, but now I would like to go actually to the checkout controller, to the prepayment method, and show you what is happening there. And then we will fail validations, and I will get back to these lines in the code. And of course, we will not fail the validation later, and then we will go to the complete Stripe payment function. But for now, let's go to the checkout controller. Here we are in the prepayment validation function. So we have this request object. So this is the form data that we passed onto the request. And the course ID and the course slug parameters are also here. So don't forget that the URL is /course ID /course slug. So we have access to those variables as well. During the Braintree integration, I used the same function or method here, this prepayment validation, and I provided a lot of detail about this method there. Of course, during the Stripe integration, I will also go through it, but if you want more information about it, then I suggest checking the Braintree integration section if you haven't done so. So we have our validator variable here, and we use the validator facade or class in Laravel. Then we use the make method, or call the make method, and we pass all the request data to it. And then here we define our validation rules. We have the same rules for the first name and for the last name fields. They are both required. They must both be strings, and they cannot be longer than 191 characters. Now, I think there is no name in the world that is close to 191 characters, so we are safe with this validation criterion. And then we have a last criterion, new only ASCII characters. This is a custom validation rule that I implemented, and it means that only ASCII characters are valid for the first name field and for the last name field. Now, if you want to know more about this custom validation, then you should again check the Braintree section, because I get into more detail about this in the Braintree section, and I really don't want to duplicate this in these videos, but the gist is that only ASCII characters can be passed to the first name and last name fields, and this is because of 3D Secure. If you don't know what 3D Secure is, then I suggest watching our video about 3D Secure, because both the Braintree and the Stripe implementation can handle the 3D Secure 2 workflow. But what is important for us in this video, at least, is that both Braintree and Stripe suggest having this validation, or not letting the customer to submit non-ASCII characters in the first name or last name. Actually, if we accept other characters than ASCII, then Braintree will throw a validation error for us. Stripe, I think, has some sort of workaround for it, but they also confirm that sort of the best way is to force the customer to use only ASCII characters in the first name and the last name fields. Now the rest of the validations are simpler. So the street is required, it has to be a string, it cannot be more than 191 characters. The apartment is nullable, because not every street has this apartment information or additional information. This field is actually this apartment, suite, unit, and so on, but some addresses only have a house number and a street, so this has to be nullable. And as you can see, there is no red star next to this label. Okay, going back to the prepayment validation method. So phone is also nullable. It does not have to be provided, but of course we're happy if the customer provides it for us. The city, however, is required. It has to be a string, maximum 191 characters. A zip code is also required. It has to be a string, maximum 150 characters. And then we have the state and the country. These fields are both required. They both have to be string, and they have an additional validation. So the exists validation criterion, which means that this value that comes from the state, it has to be present in the states table in our database under the state code column. With the country value, it has to exist in the countries table under the code column. Let's quickly check our database. So it is the countries table. Yeah. So this is the code column. So whatever the customer submits, it has to be in this column. It doesn't matter actually which row. And if we go to the checkout and press F12, let's get the country element. And as you can see, the value for Afghanistan is AF, then AX for the islands, and so on and so on. And this corresponds with our database table. So AF for Afghanistan, for example. And the same is true, of course, for the state. So we have this state, for example, Badakhshan, BDS, the value is BDS, that the customer is going to submit. And our state table is here. So the state code is also BDS for Badakhshan. So basically this validation cannot be failed. So the state and the country only if I tamper with the values right here in the elements or in the page source. If you're interested in how these values get loaded, then watch the Braintree section if you haven't done so, because I walk you through the JavaScript that is needed for loading the country code and the countries and the states into the checkout front end. But now let's stick with the Stripe integration here. So yeah, so that was it. These are the validations that we make, and if the validator fails, so if a fails is true basically, then we are returning a JSON response and we are returning the validation errors. Let's fail validation now. So I will close this. Let me just refresh. And I will fill in some dummy info. Now, in earlier videos, I also talked about this fill in dummy info JavaScript function. Basically, it just helps us to fill in dummy customer info. So when we test, we don't have to manually put in the first name, last name, and so on and so on. So first, let me just not tick the checkbox. I think I already showed you this validation, but let's just go step by step. Okay, I click on this, click to complete purchase. And indeed, the validation error is shown that the current terms and conditions must be accepted. So let me accept the terms and conditions, and then I'm going to use the umlaut A in the first name, so we will receive a different validation message. And indeed, first name and last name must contain letters only from the English alphabet. So this is our validation message, and this is because I used the umlaut A in the first name. So we see that this part of the code is working. So our validations are fine. But we have some more additional validations, and actually these should never fail, but of course we are super safe in this project. So we are getting the course from the database based on the course ID that we passed in the URL. Now if we don't find this course, then we return a JSON response that, okay, the course doesn't exist. It should never happen, obviously. However, if the course exists, but this course slug, so that comes with the request, is not the same as the slug of the course that we found in the database, then we have some discrepancy in the course data and we are not comfortable with the customer buying this course. So we will return with the JSON response with an error key. And a very important validation is that we validate the price. So if we found a course and the course seems to be fine, so the data of the course seems to be fine, then we check the price of the course, and then we check the total from the request. So as you remember, we appended the total amount to the form data that we submitted to this method, and if it is not the same as the price in our database, then we will return with an error price discrepancy. So this can only happen if the user tampers with the total amount on the front end. I showed it to you earlier that we have this 555.55 amount for this course on the front end. Yep. So if the user does something with this amount, then we are not letting the user buy it, because this will not be a valid request, and it will cause problems for us. So we have this validation as well. However, if the user didn't do anything with the price of the course or the total amount, then we are returning JSON response, and the key will be successful validation and the value will be success. Let's go to the Stripe.js now. So if everything is fine, then the result object that is returned will have the property successful validation, and then we can complete the Stripe payment. However, in the example, I failed the validation, so we hit this else branch here in the code. And then we had this field errors variable, so we called JSON stringify on the result object. So we called JSON stringify on this, sorry, it's not the right controller. So for example, when we got the first name and last name validation failure, then we got this response that first name, and then the first name can contain only English characters. So if I go back to the Stripe.js file, then we are stringifying this result object, and then we call beautify.json on these field errors, this variable. And let's check now what this beautify.json does. This function should be in the checkout.js file. Yes, so we have a string that we passed here, so it's the passed string argument or variable. And then we are just replacing these JSON specific characters. So when we show the error message to the customer, and it's here, I thought I refreshed the page. So when we show this validation error message to the customer, then in an original form, it contains a lot of characters that are JSON specific. So for example, the curly braces or the backslash or the square bracket and so on and so on. And then we just want to replace all these things. This G means globally in JavaScript. So we just want to replace all these things and show a nice error message to the customer here without any curly braces or square brackets. And actually, we replace the periods with a period and a break, which is good. If we fail multiple validations, then we want the customer to see these validations right below each other. So we don't want to present a very long validation message without any line breaks to the customers. Sorry, I actually just made a mistake. I mean, not in the code, just the way I described it. So actually, I told you that the backslash here will be replaced. Actually, no, the opening square bracket will be replaced with nothing, so with an empty string. The backslash here is only used for escaping the character. But now let's get back to the Stripe.js file. So we have beautified our error message, and then we are showing this error message, and then we are returning, so we are not proceeding with the payment. However, we indeed want to proceed with the payment. Now, let's assume that everything was fine with the validation, and we can jump to the complete Stripe payment function. We will be using the fetch API in this function, which is also a way for sending asynchronous requests, just as Ajax is a way for doing that. And the reason I do it is that I promised you that we will sort of follow the logic that we are provided with in this official Stripe GitHub repository, and they, as you can see, they also use fetch here. So I also wanted to use fetch so that you can see how Stripe intended this whole thing to be done. And actually, I think the fetch API is a really great way to deal with asynchronous requests, and it is working really well with Stripe. So let's go into the details now. So we are fetching or sending a request to the payment/stripe/payment intent ID URL. Now this payment intent ID, if you remember, is a 0. It's a string of 0, and it was declared at the top of the page, and you will see shortly why it is a 0 and what a payment intent is, because of course we have to talk about it. So we will arrive at this URL, and let's just check in the web.php file what will take care of this request. So payment stripe, payment intent ID, it's a post request, and the get stripe payment intent method of the Stripe controller is going to take care of this request for us. But now let's go back to the Stripe.js file. Yes, it's, oh no, sorry, misclick. So Stripe.js, yeah. So we are fetching this URL, then the method is post, and then we will provide the headers. Now the content type is application JSON, so the request we are sending JSON in our request, and we will also provide a CSRF token here in the header. So for this X CSRF token, we have the CSRF token. So don't forget that, because if it's a post request, we must provide a CSRF token, otherwise the request will be invalid. We have arrived at the request body. So we are calling JSON stringify, and we will pass an amount and a currency. So the amount we get from this form data, we get the total, the total value based on the total key, so to say, from this form data object. So don't forget that this form data object is what we had here, and we appended the basic data to this form data. So now we only need the amount from it, or the total from it, but the key has to be amount for Stripe. And then we also have to provide a currency, and this is going to be the chosen currency. Now, if you search for this chosen currency in this JS file, you see that there is only one occurrence, because it is actually declared in the checkout.js file, where our helpers are. And yeah, as you can see, there is a variable chosen currency, and we got this PHP variable currency text raw. So our view was passed on to, the checkout controller passed this currency text raw PHP variable to our view, and now we can use it in our JavaScript with the @JSON directive, or if we call the @JSON directive on it. And then we will have the chosen currency or the set currency of the project here in a JavaScript variable as well. Now let's go back to Stripe.js. Yep, so we pass the amount and we pass the currency. There is no more data that we have to provide with this fetch request. However, when we send this request, then of course it's an asynchronous request, but we want to wait for what is sent back, and of course we have to act on that data, and this is what this then handler does. So this then handler comes into play when we already have the response from this fetch URL. But before we get into this part of the code, then we have to go to our Stripe controller and check how the payment is made, or how the payment intent is created actually. So let's just go to the Stripe controller. And yes, what is interesting for us is the get stripe payment intent method. So we get our request data. So this request is going to be the what we provide in the body, so the amount and the currency. And then we have the payment intent ID, which is going to be null. So we have /0. Not null, sorry, 0. So we have /0 here. However, in the Stripe controller, I gave it a default value of null. However, it is going to be 0 in our current request. We are getting the Stripe settings. Now, if we don't get the Stripe settings, we are returning null, and it should never happen that we don't get the Stripe settings from the database. And then after we get the Stripe settings, we will check if we are in the test environment or in the live environment. So if we are not in the test environment, then of course we have to be in the live environment. Regardless of the environment, we need to set an API key, and we will use the Stripe class for it. So we call the set API key method of the Stripe class. And if we are in a test environment, then we are using, of course, the test secret key from our database, and otherwise the live secret key. If we are not set in our API key, then we will not be able to create or retrieve a payment intent. So these are crucial steps, and as you will see, it is only included actually in the official Stripe GitHub repository. Let's move on then. We will have an intent variable. It will be null. This will be the payment intent that we get from Stripe. And then we also have a currency lowercase variable. So we provided the currency in the request, and we are calling string to lower on it. So it will be all lowercase, and this is how we will pass it on to Stripe. And then we will have an adjusted amount variable. Later I will get back to this. So we have an amount converter helper class, and then we have this get Stripe amount based on currency method in the class, and I will tell you all about it. So we will get back to this, but at this point I would like to just go and show you the rest of the code, and I don't want to break this nice payment intent creation. By the way, it's necessary to include the Stripe class at the top of our file, and you see that we have use stripe/stripe and use stripe/payment intent. This is the class that we are going to use for creating or retrieving a payment intent. If you remember at the very beginning of the project, we installed the Stripe SDK, so this is how we have access to these classes. And don't be confused by this backslash at the very beginning. It only means that we are taking this Stripe class from the global namespace. I think it should work without the backslash actually, but I think I just copied this from a Stripe documentation. But yeah, this just means that is the Stripe class from global namespace. So if we had another Stripe class, then we would still take the Stripe class from the global namespace. Now let's go back to our method, our getStripe payment intent method. All right, so we have an amount in a format that Stripe likes, and then we hit this if branch. So if the payment intent ID is 0, which is in our case now, or nothing or null, then we are going to create a payment intent. So we are using this payment intent class, and we call the create method on it. We have to provide an amount to the payment intent, or for the creation of the payment intent, which will be this adjusted amount. And then we have to provide a currency, and this will be the currency in lowercase. And then there is also this payment method types. And our demo project, we are using the card payment. So this is what we will provide for the payment method types. And this should be sufficient for Stripe or for the Stripe SDK to create the payment intent for us. But what is this payment intent? So the payment intent is basically a token that has information about the transaction that we want to make or the customer wants to make. If you do a quick Google search like payment intent, then you will see this people ask section, and this question in this section is what is payment intent in Stripe? And it says the payment intent encapsulates details about the transaction, such as the supported payment methods, in our case credit card, the amount to collect, and the desired currency. So if you go back to the code, yeah, that is exactly what the payment intent is about. So it has information on the amount, currency, and the payment method types. Now, after we will have successful test payments, I will go to the Stripe dashboard and I will show you why I think a payment intent is a very clever idea from Stripe. But for now, it's enough that we need a payment intent to charge the customer, and the payment intent can be created or it can be retrieved if a payment was unsuccessful. I will get back to this part of the code after a after payment failure with Stripe, but let's just say that we can retrieve a payment intent by its ID, and then we can also update a payment intent. And of course, we need the payment intent ID, and then we can update the details of it. In this demo project, actually, it's not necessary to update anything about the payment intent, but I just wanted to show you that this can also be done. And after we fail a payment, then we will go back to this part of the code. But for now, let's just say that we were able to create this payment intent, and let's just return this payment intent. And let's go back to the Stripe.js file. And then we are arriving in the then handler. We will come back to this then handler obviously later, but I will talk about how we can, or how we have to adjust the amount for Stripe. So this is a part from the Stripe controller that I skipped, and I told you that I would like to go back to this line of code. So next I'm getting back to this line of code, and then we are going to resume the Stripe payment, or the charging the customer. So we created a payment intent and we returned that intent. However, as I mentioned, I would like to talk about this amount conversion for Stripe. So let's just search for the amount converter helper file in our demo project, and let's see what this get Stripe amount based on currency method does. Okay, in app helpers, you will find this file. And this is the get Braintree amount based on currency. And yeah, this is what we need. Get Stripe amount based on currency. To this method, we will give provide two parameters, the currency and the amount. And I just want to bring it to your attention that this currency lowercase, so where we lowercase the currency, is not what we pass on to this function. So we are going to pass the uppercase currency string to this function. And what we're doing here is we create an array, this 0 decimal currencies array, and this is what we call in PHP an associative array, so an array of key value pairs. And we have here the so-called 0 decimal currencies like BIF, I know this is the Japanese yen, for example, and then the value is always 1. So the value is not important for us. The important thing here for us is that we have this array here, which has the 0 decimal currencies as keys. And then we just make a very, very quick check. So we call the array key exists function, and we say that if the currency, so for example, if USD is in this 0 decimal currencies as a key, so if this array has the key USD, then we are going to return the integer value of the amount, so of what we are going to charge the customer. Otherwise, if the currency is not a key in this array, then we are going to return the amount multiplied by 100. And at this point, you might be very, very confused of what is happening here, because if we want to charge the customer, for example, 100 USDs, then we are going to return 100 times 100, because USD is not a 0 decimal currency. However, if we want to charge the customer 100 Japanese yens, then we are just returning 100 yens. So what is the logic here? To understand what is happening here exactly and why it is happening at all, we have to consult the Stripe documentation, and I actually put the link here as a comment. So let's press Ctrl and click, and I'm comfortable opening this link. We get information about the supported currencies in Stripe, but this is not what is really important for us now, but the important section for us comes here, so 0 decimal currencies. And what is very, very important is this. All API requests expects amounts to be provided in a currency's smallest unit. For example, to charge 10 USD, provide an amount value of 1000, in other words, 1000 cents. For 0 decimal currencies, still provide amounts as an integer, but without multiplying by 100. For example, to charge 500 yens, so this should be the Japanese yen, I think, provide an amount value of 500. And here is the list of the 0 decimal currencies in Stripe. And this is the list that we loaded, so to say, into our 0 decimal currencies array. Let's go back to the documentation. So if we don't have a 0 decimal currency, so if we have, for example, USD, which is not in this list, then we have to provide the smallest unit, the amount in the smallest unit. So if we want to charge 10 USD, we have to multiply it with 100. So we will charge the customer 1000 cents. And this is how the Stripe API works. But if you're working with a 0 decimal currency, then you don't multiply it by 100 because, there should be no cents for these currencies. However, you have to provide an integer value. So we just return in our code the integer value of the amount. And actually, what we get here, what is passed on to this function when we are working with the 0 decimal currency should already be an integer amount. However, we are super safe and we are returning the integer value of this passed amount in case there is a 0 decimal currency. Now, otherwise, if it's not a 0 decimal currency, for example, USD, then we have to multiply the amount by 100. So we will provide the amount in the smallest unit for Stripe. So instead 10 USD, it will be 1000 USD. 1000 USD cents, sorry. Let's go back to documentation still, because there are two special cases. Stripe treats the Hungarian forint, HUF, as a 0 decimal currency for payouts, even though you can charge 2 decimal amounts. When you create a manual payout in HUF, only integer amounts that are evenly divisible by 100 are allowed. For example, if you have an available balance of HUF 10.45, you can pay out HUF 10 by submitting 1000 for the amount value. You can't submit a payout for the full balance HUF 10.45 because the amount value of 1045 is not evenly divisible by 100. So in our demo application, the HUF is not here, is not in the array, so we are multiplying it by 100, which is fine. However, if you are working with HUF, you have to be careful because it has to be also evenly divisible by 100. We don't have a special logic here for HUF. However, if that is your case, then you should consider this. Now, however, it should really not happen that you have an HUF currency and you want to charge the customer for decimal amounts. So the amount in HUF that we pass here should always end with 2 zeros as the decimal places if we are using decimals in the project. And let's go back to the documentation again, because we have one other special case. The Ugandan shilling, UGX, was a decimal-based currency, but it is now effectively a 0 decimal currency. To maintain backwards compatibility, amounts must be passed in with 2 decimals. For example, to charge 5 Ugandan shillings, provide an amount value of 500, so 5 times 100, and be evenly divisible by 100. For example, an amount value of 499 is not allowed. So it's very similar actually to the Hungarian forint. The UGX is not in the list. It's not in the list. So we are going to multiply it by 100. Just keep in mind that if the currency is UGX in your project, then you cannot use decimals. So the decimals always have to end with 0.00. Otherwise, after we multiply the amount with 100, this final amount will not be evenly divisible by 100, and Stripe will not let you charge the customer. And actually that's it. That's all about Stripe currencies. If you are integrating Stripe into your project, then I suggest to check this currency page from time to time. You never know if a new 0 decimal currency will be added, or if a new special case will be added here. I don't think it should happen frequently, but it's better just to keep an eye out on this part of the documentation. We are proceeding with the Stripe payment or completing the Stripe payment. However, let me just provide a quick recap because we had a small sort of break and we were talking about the currencies and Stripe. So I hope you still remember that after we succeeded the validation, we called the complete Stripe payment function, in which we use the fetch API for sending an asynchronous request to payment/Stripe/payment intent ID, which was a post request, and we provided an amount and a currency for this request, and it was in the Stripe controller, so the method was in the Stripe controller that took care of our request. It was this get Stripe payment intent, and if you remember, and then we converted the amount for this Stripe, for charging in Stripe. And then we created this payment intent. So with the amount, the currency, and the payment method type as a card. So we created the payment intent, and then we returned this payment intent. So now we are continuing where we left off, and when we will go to the Stripe JS file, and we receive this payment intent, which actually is received by this then handler. So we made this request, so we called fetch, and we made the request, and then the payment intent is back. However, in this then handler, we have this anonymous function and this res parameter, and this is actually a response object that we get back. Now this response object has an OK property. And if this OK property is not true, so this is why we have this exclamation mark here. If it's not true, then we are returning server error Stripe variable, which, if you remember, was declared at the bottom of the page. And this is just my custom error message, so server error occurred Stripe. Otherwise, if this OK property is true on the response object, then we are calling JSON on the response object. The reason we do it like this is how the fetch API works. So we get back a response object, but if we don't check for this OK property, we don't know if the request was a failure or a success. For example, if the URL is not good, then the OK property of the request is false because we got back HTTP response that says that it was a failure. So, I couldn't complete this request. Then I return this server Stripe variable, which is just a string. Otherwise, then we have to call JSON on this response object, and then we actually have access to the returned value or this returned payment intent that was created by our controller. So after fetching or after calling fetch, we have a then handler, and in this then handler, we are checking if the response is okay, and if it is okay, then we are calling the JSON function here, and again we have a then handler here. And in this then handler, we again have an anonymous function, and then we have a data parameter. Now, this data parameter at this point is either going to be this server error Stripe variable, or this string that is saved into this variable, or it is going to be the payment intent that was returned. And we had to call JSON on the response object to get this payment intent that was created. So we check if the data is the same as the string in the server error Stripe variable, then it means that the response was not okay, so we didn't get back the payment intent, and then we show an error and scroll up with the error message, unknown error occurred during Stripe payment, and then we return. So we don't proceed with the Stripe payment. However, if the data does not equal this server error Stripe, then we skip this whole thing, and then we save the payment intent ID, and this payment intent ID is contained by the ID property of the data object that we got back. So basically the data is the payment intent that we got back. When I show you an unsuccessful payment, then I will talk about why I saved this payment intent ID on line 99. However, now it's not important for us because we will proceed with the payment or the card payment. So we reached line 100. We have the Stripe object. Don't forget that this comes from the Stripe JavaScript SDK. And then we call confirm card payment on it. Now, what is very important is that we have our payment intent, so the data, and then we have to provide the client secret property to this confirm card payment method. So without this, it will not work. And of course, we have to provide additional data to it as well, this data. Let's just quickly check the Stripe documentation on confirm card payment function. So this is the link that you will need. And yeah, here use Stripe.confirm card payment when the customer submits your payment form. When called, it will confirm the payment intent with data you provide and carry out 3D secure or other next actions if they are required. If you are using dynamic 3D secure, Stripe.confirm card payment will trigger your radar rules to execute and may open a dialog for your customer to authenticate their payment. Why I want to show you this is that I use it because we are using 3D Secure in our project. And when I will submit a successful payment and when I will show you how 3D Secure works in Stripe, I will go to my dashboard and I will tell you about the radar rules and and 3D Secure. However, this little detour is just for your information that this confirm card payment is used because of 3D Secure. And actually, I think it's a lot cleaner to use this confirm card payment method than what we will see in the official Stripe GitHub repository. But of course, don't forget that this is official Stripe documentation, so it's totally fine to use the confirm card payment here. But let's get back to our Stripe.js file. So I talked about the client secret already. So we have the payment method key and the card. So, the payment method is card, and then we provide our card here that we have. Remember that we have a variable called card. So it should be var card, yeah. So we are providing that. And then there are the billing details of the customer. So name, it comes from our form data. We are getting the first name, and then we concatenate the last name to the first name. Of course, we add a space in between. Don't forget that this is the form data that we at the very beginning appended the data to. So it has all the information that the customer provided on our checkout here. As an email, we will provide the email address value, and there is the address information for the address key. We will provide this data for these sub keys, so to say. So we will get the country, the state data, city. This line 1 should be the street, and line 2 the apartment if there is one. I told you about earlier that there might be nothing here actually for this apartment field. So we have to provide it for the line 2 key, and then the postal code is like the zip code. Earlier I told you about the importance of ASCII characters in the first name and last name fields, and it is also very important to provide these ISO codes for country and state. In our demo project, we are using the correct ISO codes for the country and state values, and both in Braintree and PayPal, it is really, really important that you provide the ISO codes. As you can see, then there is again a then handler, so it means that this confirm card payment is an asynchronous request, and when it is finished, then we have this data parameter. And if the data parameter has an error property, then we are going to show an error and scroll up, and we should get the error message by passing data.error.message here. So this data object has an error property, and then it has a message property. And then we return, so the card payment was not successful. So this is the point where we actually submitted card payment or payment However, it failed. So this is the part of the code where we handle this failure. Now, if this data that we get back is not, or the data.error is not true, then it means that we will have access to the data payment intent. So we have the payment intent property, or we at least should have the payment intent property if there were no errors. And then we will add the course ID to this hidden input field, to course Stripe, and we will get the transaction ID, the data.paymentintent.id. So this is how we can get the transaction ID, and this will be shown on your dashboard after the payment is finished or completed successfully, and we actually want to save it. So we will save it to this transaction Stripe hidden input field, and we will call the append payment data function, and we add our form data and the key underscore Stripe. Now it is in the checkout.js file. I mean, this function is in the checkout.js file, and it's here. So what this function does is that it takes this completed form data. So remember that this form data contains all the contact information, billing address of the customer. And then based on the gateway key, which is underscore Stripe for us, it will populate the hidden input fields on our checkout front end. During the Braintree integration, I provided a bit more detail about how this function works. It might be a bit confusing, but actually it's really not that hard. So you should go back to the Braintree integration if you want to know more about this function. But of course, I will tell you the gist of it. So remember that on our checkout, so let's go to our checkout. Let's press F12. We have this form that is totally empty. Yeah, with these hidden inputs. Now, when we validate the request, we create a form data and we add the contact information, the billing address to this form data, and then we pass it on to our controller, and then we do the validations and so on and so on. However, this form is still empty, so we are not doing anything with this form. But when the payment is successful, then we will load data to this form, and we will just take this form data that we already loaded the data to, and then we will load the data to our form as well here. And our form data, for example, it has a key for first name. You see that these are the input names. And our complete form data has all these keys. And if you see, if you watch closely, then these first name, last name, phone, and so on, they correspond with the IDs of the hidden inputs. I mean, not fully, but we have a first name key, we don't have underscore Stripe. We have a last name key, we don't have underscore Stripe concatenated to it, but you get what I mean. So all these strings are in our complete form data as keys and are also in our form. Now we are looping through these keys. They will be the item, so you know when we loop in the first iteration, the item will be the first name, and then we say, okay, get me the hidden input with the ID of item, so first name, plus gateway key. And the gateway key is underscore Stripe. So what we are doing is first name underscore Stripe, set the value based on the form data that we passed here, that we passed to the function, and get the item value. So get the first name value here. I hope it's not that confusing for you anymore. So what you have to know at this point is that with this append payment data function, we are just loading data to our Stripe form. And we did the same with Braintree, actually, during the Braintree integration, because maybe you will not use all three payment gateways like Braintree, Stripe, and PayPal, but you only want to use Stripe. So that's why we have this Stripe form here, and that's why we have a Braintree form here. But maybe you want to use both integrations, and then we have to sort of differentiate between the two. So this is why there are two different forms for these two different payment gateways. Let's go back to the Stripe.js file now. So we load all the data into our form on the front end, to our Stripe form. Then we show a processing model to our customer, and then we are going to submit the form. Don't forget that this Stripe form variable refers to this form that I just showed you. So we were selecting the form with the ID payment form Stripe. And if you check it, then this is the payment form Stripe form. And as you can see, this form will be submitted to checkout/fulfill/order. So at this point, the Stripe payment was a success. So we didn't get, we called confirm card payment, we didn't get an error. So it means that everything was fine, the customer was charged, and then we add some data to our Stripe form. Then we append some more data to our Stripe form and show a model, and then we are submitting this form. And next we are going to see where this form is submitted and what is happening. And that will be the end of the Stripe payment. Now we are going to see what happens when we submit the form. So we will have to check for this checkout fulfill order route. Let's go to web.php, and yep, it's here. So it is a post request, and the fulfill order method of the checkout controller is taking care of the request. The checkout controller is open here, and yeah, this is the fulfill order method. We are getting the request here, the request data. So it's the form that was filled in the previous video. First, we get the authenticated user. Now, if there is no authenticated user, we are redirecting back with input. So with the input that the customer provided for buying the course, like contact information and billing address. And we redirect with a failure message, payment received, but logged in user not found. Now, the thing is that we should never reach this part of the code. However, if someone paid and paid successfully, however, not logged in, then we will not be able to make connection between the user and the course. So we will not be able to grant access to the user, to the course. So we are redirecting back, and we tell the user that, okay, actually we received your payment, but you're not logged in. So, you know, he can contact the site administrator or, you know, the web shop owner, and then they can sort it out what happened there, and he can get his access to the course. But I'm telling you that this should never happen, but we are super safe, and we want to give meaningful feedback to our customers. Okay, we are checking the course. So if this course is the course ID here, the request course contains the course ID. And if you don't find the course, then, you know, we again give a meaningful error message that payment was received, but the course has not been found. So then the customer should contact the site owner and then sort it out. But hopefully we will never ever reach these two lines in the code. Now we get the transaction ID from the request, and now we have an order data, which is an empty array. So obviously now the payment was received and everything seems to be fine, and now we want to go to our database and then add a new row about the order data. So we will have the data of the order, and then, you know, later we can check what happened in the order. Obviously, this is something you want to save into your database. Now this is the orders table, so this is where we will save the order data. Going back to Visual Studio Code, so we have this empty order data array, but we have an order data helper and a get order data method, and we will load this order data with the data that we want to save into the database. So let's go to this order data helper. Oh, actually, it's open for me. Okay, this is the method that we are interested in. The first parameter is this data array, and this is the empty order data array that we created here. However, we are using this ampersand, so it means that we are passing it as a reference. So anything we do with this data array here will be reflected in the checkout controller, and this is a key to this function. Then we pass by reference the request object as well, but we're not going to modify anything on the request object. And we pass by reference the auth user as well. We are not going to modify anything on the auth user or the authenticated user, sorry. And we have the course title and transaction ID. We want to save these things as well into our order or into our database. Maybe you already noticed, but the keys that I define for this array, for this associative array, are the same as the column names in the order table. So customer underscore name, user underscore email, price, and so on and so on. So yeah, price, user underscore email, customer underscore name. So these are absolutely the same, and this will be important a bit later. So I'm saving the ID of the authenticated user, the customer name. I'm concatenating the first name and the last name, saving the email of the authenticated user, then the total of the request object as a price. So this is what the customer paid. The ID of the purchased course, which comes from the request object, then the course title. This does not come from the request object, but we provided it in the checkout controller. So course title. And the transaction ID was also provided from the checkout controller. And then we have the rest comes from the request object. So now we have a loaded associative array with the keys that correspond to the column names of the orders table. Let's go back to the checkout controller. So now we create a new order. So this will be what gets into our database. And what we are doing is that we are looping through the keys of the order data. So actually we are looping through the keys and the values, but we are not going to use the values. We just want the keys here. And what happens is that we have this order object, and then we refer to the key. So the first key, and during the first iteration, the key will be user underscore ID. So order user underscore ID equals order data user underscore ID. And we saved the ID of the authenticated user into this data array or into this associative array. So what happens is actually we have an empty associative array, then we are filling in the data to this array, and then we are creating a new order, and then with a simple loop we are just iterating through this associative array and saving the order data into the database. And of course we call save on this order object, and this is when it's going to get into our database. Now of course you might think that it's totally unnecessary to create an empty associative array and then to load the data into it and then for each in it and then saving it into the order object, because we can just create the order object and then we can just do the same thing here as we did actually. And you're right, actually, this can also be done, and if you say that if it's cleaner, I agree with you. However, I want you to do it in this way because this is just a demo project, but maybe you want to build upon it. And if you do, then you already have this order data helper and this get order data method, and you are free to change it any way you want, and you are free to add other payment gateways to the project and so on and so on. And I think from a point of view of extending the project, it's good that there is this order data helper class and that there is this get order data function. But we could do we could just create a new order, and then we could just copy the code from here basically to here, and we would arrive at the same solution. But in case you want to extend the project, I think it's a nice touch. Anyway, our order is saved, so the order data is saved, and there is one more thing we want to do. Of course, we want to associate the user with the course. So we go to the user courses table and we search for the user ID, and then we search for the course ID and get the first row. Now the thing is that there should be nothing here, so this user course should be null, because if a user already has access to the course, then in the checkout controller we are actually checking if that's the case, and if that is the case, then we don't let the user go to the checkout and buy the course. But this demo project is designed in a way that if you're an admin or if you're logged in as an admin, then you can buy a course as many times as you want, because, you know, if you are testing your payment integrations, you don't want to go to the database and delete your order maybe, or delete the information, or always migrate and see the database. So we wanted to give this freedom to the admins, or, you know, to the admin users in the demo application for testing. However, normally this should be null. So, you know, the customer should not have already access to the course before buying it. And if it's null, then we are going to create a new user course. So, you know, we are going to add a new row to the user courses table with the user's ID and with the course ID. And then we are just going to save this info into the database. So the user is going to have access to the course in the future. But of course, if this is not null in the demo application, then it means that there is an admin who bought the course, and the admin is already associated with the course because they bought it at least once. And if this is the case, then we just skip this code. So we will not create a new user course here because the admin is already associated with the course. However, after we are done with this part of the code, we are just redirecting back to the thanks route, and it will a thank you message will be shown. Now that we are done with the code and we know how an order is created, it's time for us to make a successful Stripe payment. After the failed payments, let's now make a successful payment with Stripe. So we are here at the checkout controller. Let me quickly refresh it. I will fill in the dummy info. Good. And I will select this checkbox, so we will not fill this validation either. And now we are at the Stripe accordion or section. And now what card number to use? Let's refer to this official Stripe GitHub repository. We can simply use this test card number for now, and we will use this card number when we will test 3D Secure in a later video. But let's just test this now. So basically it's 4242 4 times, and it doesn't matter what we put in for CVC or an expiration date, but the expiration date has to be in the future, obviously. So let's just put this card number here, expiration date in the future, and now we are clicking complete purchase. We have the spinner, data is disabled. Then we have the processing model, and then we have this success page. And I go to my dashboard, and I see that the German intermediate course is here, and I purchased it today. Very good. Let's go to my Stripe dashboard, and let's check the payments. And indeed, you see 555.55, this succeeded. This is the payment intent ID or the transaction ID, so we save the transaction ID. As you can see, this is the new row, and we have the same payment intent or transaction ID here as in the dashboard. Okay, looks good. Now I will click on it. And actually, if we scroll down, then we see the info about this payment or the payment intent. So we see that a new payment for payment PI, blah, 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 for 555.55 USD was created. A request to confirm payment intent completed, and the payment has succeeded. So we see all this activity with the payment intent. Next, we will talk about 3D Secure and what happens to the payment intent when we fail because of 3D Secure and then succeed. First, I would like to refer back to this confirm card payment method. This is the method that we implemented, if you remember. And if you're using Dynamic 3D Secure, the confirm card payment will trigger your radar rules to execute and may open a dialog for your customers to authenticate their payment. So what are these radar rules and how you can set it? So let's go back to our dashboard. So this was the successful payment intent, but we don't need this now, but let's go to settings. And here you see radar, monitor fraud with machine learning rules. And here, for me, it is set that when should a payment be sent through 3D Secure? request 3D secure if 3D secure is required for card. So as long as you have this rule in your Radar rules and enabled, then the 3D secure workflow should work for us. I think it's a very clean solution from the side of Stripe. However, in order to trigger this 3D secure in our sandbox, we need to use this card number. And actually, this is the 3D secure 2 authentication, not this one, but what you will see a bit later, this model that comes up. Yeah, yes, this is what we want to see in our test with a 3D secure 2. Okay, let's go back to the checkout. Okay, now I'm on my dashboard. And, let's just quickly reseed the database. And after I see the database, I will hit the checkout again. Okay, it's finished. Let's close this terminal window. Let's go back and let's go to courses. Oops. Good. And I will buy again this German intermediate course. I will try at least, because first I will fail. Okay, let's fill in the info. Then let's check this checkbox, and now we have a Stripe here, and we have to use this card number to trigger 3D secure. Okay, the date has to be in the future, but CVC doesn't matter. So let's click to complete purchase. Fields are disabled, spinner, and yeah, good, we had the 3D secure. Now let's fail the 3D secure and let's see what happens. Okay, this is the error message that we got back from Stripe. We are unable to authenticate your payment method. Please choose a different payment method and try again. Now let's go back to the Stripe.js file. And this is the point where we wanted to confirm the card payment. However, we got an error in the data object. And we called show error and scroll up, and we called data.error.message, and this is the message that was provided for us by Stripe. So now you could see when we hit this part of the code. However, there is one very, very important detail, that if we want to try again, then we will already have the payment intent, or the payment intent ID at least. So remember that we reached that point, so we tried to confirm the card payment, but we couldn't because of 3D secure. However, we want to retry. And we already have the payment intent ID, so when I will try again with the same card, with the same details, then we will go through the validations and everything else, so the same process. However, note that the payment intent ID is now not null, not a zero, sorry. So when we first refreshed the checkout or hit the checkout, then it was 0. And then when we hit this payment/Stripe URL, then a new payment intent was created for us, but we saved the ID of this payment intent to the payment intent ID variable. So the next time, I will try it again. So the next time when we come to this complete Stripe payment function, we are going to fetch this URL. However, it's not going to be 0, the payment intent ID, but it's going to be the payment intent ID, indeed. So let's go to the Stripe controller and check what happens then. Okay, Stripe controller. We are here. So we hit this method, and then we set the API key and so on and so on. The intent is going to be null. However, we are not running into or not hitting this if branch, because the payment intent ID is not a 0. It's not nothing and it's not null. It's the payment intent ID that Stripe already created for us before we failed the payment. So we are hitting the else branch finally in the code, and we are retrieving our payment intent through the retrieve method and with our already existing payment intent ID that we provided in the URL. And at this point, actually, we could just return the payment intent here. However, as I mentioned in an earlier video, I just wanted to show you that if you want to update the payment intent, you can do it like this. And here I'm just updating the amount. However, it is the same amount that was there. So it's the same amount that the customer wanted to pay before the failed payment. So this is really just an example for you that this is how you can update the details of the payment intent. Now, I don't think that you really want to update the currency of the payment intent, maybe the payment method type you want to update. However, I think there are certain scenarios where you want to update the payment intent. So maybe in your project, you have a so-called order bump or something. So the customer gets a total. However, if the customer ticks a checkbox, then an additional item is added to the cart. It can happen. And maybe the customer doesn't add this item to the cart. However, after a failed payment, customer decides that, okay, let's just add this item to the cart and let's just try again with the payment. And in this case, you actually want to update the payment intent amount. Now, what is important for us is that when I try to pay again with the same details, then we have this payment intent, and we use this payment intent that was already created by us. And in the Stripe dashboard, we will see more information about the payment. So let me just retry paying. So I just have to click to complete purchase again. And when the model shows up with 3D Secure, I'm just going to complete it. Yep. And my order should be created. We get the order confirmation, everything is fine, and let's check the orders. Yeah, actually, no new order was created because I reseeded the database, but this is the new order, believe me. However, it has the same data as the previous order that I deleted from the database through the seeding. And this is the payment intent that we got back. So the end is ASMK. Let's check our Stripe dashboard. And let's go to payments. Okay, as you can see that there are two payments that were succeeded, and this is with the new payment intent, and this was with the previous payment intent when we didn't hit the 3D Secure workflow. Now let's check this payment intent or this transaction. Let's check the timeline. This payment was verified with 3D Secure and is protected from being disputed for fraud. Very good, this is what we wanted to see here. Now let's scroll down, and here we see this activity. So all activity, and you see that the payment intent, a request to create a payment intent completed. We got a new payment intent for this $555.55, yes. And then we confirm the payment intent. However, then this payment required action to complete it. And then an attempt to fulfill the payment failed. It was when the 3D Secure model showed and I clicked on failed. And you see that the 3D Secure failed. However, after that, a request to update payment intent completed, a request to confirm a payment intent completed, and we are using the same payment intent. So the payment intent requires you to take action. So again, the 3D Secure model showed. And then we were charged for $555.55 USD, and the payment with this payment intent ID succeeded. So Stripe really has a nice workflow, and Stripe shows us so much information about the payment. So if a payment failed but then succeeded, you see the whole workflow here. Now, Braintree has a slightly different approach. With Braintree, you will see if a transaction was rejected. However, it is going to be a separate transaction. And then if the customer succeeds with paying, then you will have a successful transaction. However, that will be a separate transaction. Now, actually, I think that both approaches have advantages and disadvantages. So one is not better than the other. However, I really like how Stripe handles this log or this payment intent stuff, because you have a really great idea of what happened with the payment if the payment was not successful for the first time. And actually, Stripe suggests reusing or updating a payment, retrieving and updating payment intents instead of creating new payment intents. And I think that, yes, indeed, it is the better way, because if you keep creating new payment intents, we could do that actually in our code, so we would not have to retrieve anything. We could always create a new payment intent, but then we would lose this information. We would not see this nice flow of a payment that first failed and then later succeeded. But it's up to you which one you prefer. This is the Stripe way, and there is also the Braintree way. As I promised, we will take a look at this official Stripe GitHub repository for accepting a card payment. Let's check the index.html file. And what is important for us here is that we have this payment form here. So the ID is payment form, and then we can submit this form. And actually, this script.js file is included. So let's go to the script.js file. In the script.js file, Stripe key is fetched, so we have this Stripe key.php file. Now this requires the shared.php once, but as you can see, then we will get the Stripe publishable key, and it should be very familiar for you. So yeah, in the config, the API key is set, actually, the secret key, and then in the Stripe key, then from the config, the Stripe publishable key is also set. So these should be very familiar to you at this point. So let's go back to script.js. Now the Stripe keys are fetched, and then everything is fine. Then the form is selected, this payment form. I showed it to you in the index.html file. And then event listener is added to it, to the submit. And this event.prevent default should be very familiar to you at this point now as well. And then the pay function is called. So let's check this pay function. It should be this, I think, var pay, yeah. And now we have this change loading state. It doesn't matter to us. Now this payment method is created. And then, as you can see, we actually use a different approach in our implementation, but we are just walking through this GitHub repository. And what is important to us is that there might be a request for authentication, or there might be an error, or the order might get completed. Let's see this handle action when authentication is required. So handle action. So again, we have this handle action, and then if there was an error, then your card was not authenticated, please try again. And if confirmation is required, then fetching the pay.php is the next step. And as you can see that the order is completed at the very end, but you can see that the payment intent ID also has to be provided in the body, in the fetch request. So a lot of things should be familiar to you at this point. Now let's check this pay.php file. And let's just scroll to the bottom. And now we have this try catch block. So there could be an error message here in the catch block. However, a payment intent is created with the amount, currency, payment method. There is also a confirmation method and confirm true. Now the thing is that because we are using the this confirm card payment method from the documentation, which it should be here, I think we could simplify this workflow a lot, and this is why I would suggest using this confirm card payment method. However, if you look at this or the GitHub repository, you see that the logic is basically the same. So there is the keys have to be set, the publishable key, the secret key, and then a payment intent is created. And of course, for us, the confirm card payment takes care of this authentication request and whatever. So I think it's better in the demo application. However, you see that the idea is the same. If there is an error, then we are going to fail with an error. However, if everything was fine, then the order is completed. And so basically, we are following this logic in this repository, but we also simplified things by digging deeper a bit into the Stripe documentation. I did some enhancement to our Stripe integration. So these enhancements are not in the project that we pulled at the very beginning. I added them later into a separate branch, so I will show you how you can get these changes. Let's open a new terminal. And you see I'm in the main branch. And what I have to do is to go to another branch. And we have a branch called Stripe Enhancement. So if you just push a tab now, it will auto complete, yes. So git checkout Stripe enhancement. This is how we can get to the Stripe enhancement branch. All right, I will just run the git pull command as well. I think I'm up to date totally. Yes, I'm up to date. So make sure that you are in the Stripe enhancement branch, so you will get the changed files. And now I will show you what changed. So let's just close this terminal, we don't need it anymore. So only two files changed. We have our Stripe controller. And we have the get, some kind of get payment. Sorry, I'm searching the wrong way. So payment intent. Yeah, in the get Stripe payment intent method of the Stripe controller, I added some extra code. As you can see, I added this code, and later I will tell you what is happening here. And in our Stripe JS file, I think I also added one extra line of code, and it should be, yes, this is it. So yes, here I added an extra line of code, and of course I will tell you why I added this extra line of code, and I will tell you why our integration became more secure because of these so-called enhancements. The reason we made this Stripe integration enhancement is that we rely heavily on JavaScript for our integration. And because JavaScript runs on the client side, it is theoretically possible that a client passes an amount here for creating a payment intent that is false, so that is not the price of the course. And even worse, they can pass a currency that is not the currency that we set in our admin. So they can pay less in a weaker currency. In order to tackle this issue, we will have some more validations or checks when we create the payment intent. And we provide the course ID to the request body under the key course ID. You might remember that we actually validate for the price in the validate data Stripe function. However, the payment intent is created after this function runs, so it is necessary to validate right before we create our payment intent. And let's now go to our Stripe controller and let's check the get Stripe payment intent method here. I believe previously we got the Stripe settings, so we queried our Stripe settings, and if the Stripe settings were null, then we return null. Of course, it is not sensible to proceed with the checkout without our Stripe settings. However, our extended code or extended checks come here. So we are querying our settings, so checkout settings, and if the settings are null, then we are returning null. Of course, our settings should never be null. But based on these settings, we are going to validate for the currency, but this part comes a bit later. We also query our course based on the course ID that was provided in the request body. And of course, if the course is null, so if an ID is provided that doesn't exist in our database, then we are returning null because something very strange is happening and we will not proceed with our checkout. But the really important checks come now. So we are getting the currency value from our settings table, and if it's not the same as the currency that was posted with the request body, then we are returning null, because then it means that the customer has made a change to the currency and it is not in harmony with the one that we wanted the customer to be charged in. And we also check for the course price, so we query the course, and if the price of this course is not the same as the price that is provided in the request body, then we are returning null. So it means that there is a course to which they want to get access. However, the amount is not in harmony with the price of the course in our database. So of course we are returning null. Now the rest of the code here is the same. So we set the Stripe API key, then we convert the amount if necessary, and we retrieve the payment intent or create the payment intent, and we are returning this payment intent. Let's go back to the Stripe.js file. So if everything is fine, of course, we are still calling the confirm card payment method, and the customer is paying. And if the payment is successful, then our form is submitted and the customer gets access to the course. Now, theoretically speaking, there is still one thing that we could improve, and it concerns this line of code. If you remember, in our form, we have a hidden input field with the ID of course Stripe, and we provide the course ID to this field, and we will give the customer access to the course whose ID is provided here. Theoretically speaking, the malicious user can figure this out. So if the malicious user knows how our backend works, then they could provide a different course ID here. So theoretically, it could happen that they pay $50 for a course. However, they get access to a course that is worth $500. It is not something easy to pull off, however, so they still have to make valid payments and they have to know how our backend works. Now to finish up this video, I would like to make a Stripe payment so you see that our Stripe payment works with this integration as well. So I've navigated to our checkout. I'm filling in the dummy info. I tick this checkbox and I am going to pay with Stripe. So I'm just using this 4242 card. So there will be no 3D secure model window now. And I click to complete the purchase. And yeah, it's working. So as you can see, our enhanced Stripe integration is working. It is more secure than the previous one. So I think that it is really worth using this integration, or this extended integration than the previous one.